Here's what we know right now. About 1,600 employees are employed at the Lordstown plant in General Motors. Right now, their future unclear right now, but again, negotiations in place trying to see what other cars can be built, or vehicles, I should say, built at the Lordstown plant for General Motors. Now, we also were hearing from Dave Green. He was talking a lot about how they're not going to be giving up hope with the Drive at Home campaign. That is something they've been doing here this past month, really trying to prove to General Motors and send a clear message that they are committed to production here in Lordstown, and it is helping the economy. We're hearing from Dave Green saying, quote, several times they feel like they have the, quote, best workforce around, and they are hoping to continue production, maybe just on a different vehicle, even though the Chevy Cruze production stopping in March of 2019. Now, General Motors announced this around 9:30 this morning. We have some details here for you on your screen, if we can, of some of the information we've been learning this morning. Dave Sess right now is live. He was at that press conference we were just hearing about at General Motors at the local 1112 Union Hall. Dave Sess is about what all he's been learning and what he's been hearing. Dave.
And what Dave Green said was that he immediately went over to the assembly plant and walked through it to hit as many or see as many workers as he could at that time. Obviously, he couldn't get to all of them, but he got to many of them, just saying, hold out hope, because he repeated a couple times today that this is not an idle, it's not a closure, it's that GM is not allocating a product to make here for 2019. Now, this is the GM agreement with the UAW. It's 700 pages. It started in 2015. It runs through 2019 when it'll be negotiated. There's really not much language talking about a non-allocated status, which is kind of used. But to realize too is that everybody thinks that the Cruze is just going to be made in Mexico now. Well, GM said this morning that's not the case. They're not going to make the Cruze anymore whatsoever. So whatever GM sees as the next step, it's been talking about electric cars, it's been talking about autonomous vehicles, it's been talking about ride-sharing vehicles. Everybody here is hoping that that could be the next step to be built in the Lordstown assembly plant and to use those workers. You talked about them. There's 1,200 assembly workers. Of course, the salaried workers too that GM employs. There's also 30 parts suppliers around the state of Ohio, including 3 in this area, Magna, Lead Act, and Jamestown, which will be impacted because they supply parts to be made into the Chevy Cruze right now, which will not be made starting in March. So what does this mean? Well, Lordstown has to find something else. They want to be on GM's radar. The Drive at Home campaign will continue. And Lordstown, the workers here, the UAW, hoping that they get on GM's radar again, that they have a great workforce. And here's what Dave Green had to say about possibly getting something down the road and telling workers to hold out hope because there might be better days ahead.
We need to convince General Motors to grow jobs here in the Mahoning Valley, protect manufacturing jobs in Ohio, and to make sure that American cars are made here in America. And I think Lordstown is the best place to do that.
Keep in mind, there's a lot of competition because GM announced today at 2 other plants basically the same thing, saying that a plant near Detroit would not be allocated a vehicle for 2019. A plant in Canada, again, not allocated a vehicle to make in 2019 as GM goes ahead and tries to make this dramatic shift. You can read about that on some of the business pages you might follow, but GM just really trying to retool and get ready for what it feels is the future of making cars in America. That's the latest from here. We're still waiting for Congressman Tim Ryan to show up as well, so hopefully we'll hear from him later on this afternoon. Live in Lordstown, Dave Sess, WKBN 27 First News.
Now, we do have team coverage of this breaking news development. News of this plant stopping production is being felt all across the valley, not just at the GM plant. We're talking about from suppliers to the facility itself to the local school district, even nearby businesses. There's not much in this area that's not touched by the tax dollars generated at the Lordstown GM facility. First News reporter Amanda Smith following this part of the story. She joins us live now outside the plant. Amanda.
Chelsea, I've been out here in Lordstown all morning talking to people in the restaurants and in the shops surrounding the plant, and everybody's very down. That was the mood, the way everybody described their moods today. They're down. They don't like this news, and it's the worst possible news that they could have gotten just before the Christmas season. Now, I spoke with workers in the Ross Eatery and Pub earlier today. They say that they know the business is going to be slowing down even more than it already has, as GM went from 3 shifts to 2 shifts and finally down to 1, and now in the next few months, none at all. They're not looking forward to that time. They say they will make it through, and they're hopeful that there will be a new product coming ahead in the future, and that's a hope that's shared by State Representative Sean O'Brien. We spoke with him earlier today.
We can't abandon it at this time. I mean, there's still a possibility of another product out there. We got to keep trying to get a new product here. The cruise is obviously going away on March 1st. So the Drive at Home campaign has to continue, maybe even, obviously even more bigger as GM looks at other vehicles.
And the hope is that there will be some vehicles somewhere that will be brought here to Lordstown, and all of the surrounding businesses can ramp up their supply once again. From now, live in Lordstown, Amanda Smith, 27 First News.
Thanks, Amanda. Now, reaction to the news of the end of the Chevy Cruise in Lordstown has been swift all morning long. We did get a response and a statement from Congressman Tim Ryan. Dave Sess was saying they're still waiting on him to get to the UAW hall, but he did issue this statement. It says, quote, "Today our generation is facing a new Black Monday in the Mahoning Valley. GM's announcement is devastating for the men and the women working at Lordstown and everyone here in the Mahoning Valley," end quote. That statement sent to us just within the past 15 minutes. We also have a new statement from Sherrod Brown on the news. He says in part, quote, "GM owes the community answers on how the rest of the supply chain will be impacted and what consequences its disastrous decision will have on the Mahoning Valley and our state." He continued on to say, "My office stands ready to do everything we can to help these workers. This decision is corporate greed at its worst." And from Ohio Governor John Kasich, he's saying, quote, "Lordstown's been part of the GM family for more than 50 years, 52 to be exact. So it's painful to see this happen to the plant's workers, their families, and the community." Kasich goes on to say they're going to be working with GM to see if anything can be done to preserve a future for the plant. And in the meantime, they've set up a jobs center to help employees find new work as quickly as possible. In addition to the Lordstown plant, GM announced today that 4 other facilities will not be allocated new products in 2019. What we mean there is designated new vehicles. Those facilities include plants in Oshawa, Ontario, Canada, an assembly plant in Detroit, a propulsion plant in White Marsh, Maryland, and a transmission plant in Warren, Michigan, not the Warren, Ohio, Warren, Michigan. Now, GM Lordstown has been an anchor in the valley for decades. Many of us know that. Over that time, we've seen many changes at the plant, a reduction in workforce and product changes over the years. This is what the plant looks like right now. There are approximately 1,400 hourly employees, almost 200 salaried employees for a total of roughly 1,600 workers, all just on one shift. The local union is UAW Local 1112. In 2017, that plant provided $250 million in wages and $48 million in withholding taxes. Those are just some numbers breaking down for you the impact this news is having on the valley.